We took a look at the AFC and how each of the individual teams in the playoffs could potentially go on a run. Let's take a look at the NFC and see how capable these teams actually are.
Man, I got a plan, I swear to you. All I think about is you guys. That's all I think about, man. That's all I think about is you guys and how I set you up for the best possible advantage I can give you to have a season. I swear to you, man. I just need you to trust me. That's all. Please.
The Lions sure feel like the team of destiny, don't they? This team went 15-2 in the regular season, but against playoff teams, they went 6-2. Both those losses came to playoff teams. That was Tampa Bay in Week 2 and Buffalo here at the end of the season. They played 3 playoff teams in the last 5 weeks of football, which does a lot for battle testing a team and getting them ready for the playoffs. Now, of course, this team has a top offense, really the top offense. That's no surprise to anyone. But what might be a bit surprising is that the defense can really hold their own. This is the number 1 third down defense in the league, and they're top 10 in the red zone as well. This is a team that strives to get down and dirty, but right now they just need to focus on getting healthy. They're getting Ennis Rakestraw back, Alex Anzalone just came back, and they've got a week off to let everyone rest and make sure Terrion Arnold is safe and ready to go, and that they come out swinging in the divisional round. The only team that worries me right now for the Detroit Lions is really the Eagles. It's never fun to face a team 3 times in a season, which they could with the Vikings, but honestly, I think that they've proven that they have a really good handling on what the Vikings are capable of and how to get into Darnold's head, as we saw in Week 18. If they have to play the Eagles are the only team that I can think of that are really built to actually stop this offense. They have a top run defense and pass defense, and their own offense behind Saquon Barkley could give this Detroit rush defense a run for their money. But this Lions team has shown time and time again that when it gets down and dirty, when games are at their closest and most critical, that's when they play their best ball.
He has just broken the 2,000-yard rushing mark. Saquon Barkley goes into NFL history.
As I just mentioned with the Eagles, they are a top defense, if not the best defense in all of football right now. Against playoff teams, they went 5-2 with a plus 29-point differential. They've played 5 of those playoff teams here in the final 8 weeks of the season, so they have been battle-tested and are carrying momentum here into the playoffs. The biggest worry right now as they go in to face the Packers is that Jalen Hurts hasn't played football in 2 weeks due to a concussion. If he comes out rusty, if he comes out not seeing the field well, not used to game speed, that's really going to cause an issue against a Packers defense that's a lot better than people are giving it credit for. Now, this team has all the pieces to make an easy run. Maybe the best running game in football, maybe the best short down game in football, and probably the best defense in football. Teams that are built like that are always going to go far. But it really comes down to if they get behind, can they lean on Jalen Hurts, or is he not going to be able to see the field, not be able to get through his reads because he's rusty? All I know is that I expect in this Packers game for Saquon to get probably like 30 carries, which if Saquon gets overused and ends up going down before they can make it to the Super Bowl, that's going to be a big issue too. Now, it's not like they don't have talent in the receiving core. A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith are maybe the best wide receiver duo in football. Dallas Goedert and Grant Calcaterra are a great tight end duo as well. They should be able to move the ball passing, but it just comes back to, can Jalen Hurts get it there? I expect them to run a lot, but I also expect defenses to really sell out to stop that run. And it's going to be interesting to see how they adapt. Do they just Tennessee Titans, Derrick Henry style muscle through it and eventually you're going to break? Or do they cave and they ask Jalen Hurts to do too much? This coaching staff needs to not panic. They need to trust their guys and let them run the show. And on the legs of Saquon Barkley, there's no reason this team can't make a Super Bowl run.
This season's always going to be a grind, man, but having y'all around make it easier.
Yes, sir.
I love y'all, man.
Love you too.
We ain't done.
Right.
We ain't done. Champs on 3, 1, 2, 3.
Guys, I really like the Buccaneers this year. This is a team that faced a lot of turmoil with the injuries early on in the season. They went on a 4-loss streak. They didn't look like they were even going to make a run for the playoffs, and then they turned it around. They go 6-1 in their final 7. They only played one playoff team in that time, which was the Chargers, which they did really, really well against. And they ended their season 4-3 against playoff teams, but a lot of them they did face rather early in the season, and a lot's changed since then. One of the things that's changed the most is that this team can run the football. Since the bye week, this is a team that averages around 180 rush yards per game. They're number 3 in yards per attempt and 4th in yards despite only being 10th in attempts. And say what you will about Baker Mayfield, but he's got heart and he's got guts. This is the number 1 third down offense and the number 4 red zone offense. This team can go toe-to-toe with anybody. It's going to come down to their defense, though. Their defense has been middling across pretty much all stats, and they haven't had much of an impressive showing even here in the back half of the season where they've been healthier. They did hold the Chargers to 17, but they gave up 26 to the Cooper Rush Cowboys. It's really hard to pin them down where exactly they're at, but their biggest advantage, they've been here before. They're one of the few teams that's already made a Super Bowl run that's here in the playoffs. Todd Bowles knows what it takes to get this defense going and to make stops at crucial times. If they can do that and run the ball, pass the ball as effectively as they have all season, the Bucs are one of my favorite teams to go on an upset. They've got the Commanders first. The Commanders are a very young team, and they've got them at home. I don't see any reason why the Bucs can't just run the score up on them and make it to where the Commanders can't catch up. If they win that game, they probably face either Philly or the Vikings or Rams. I actually really like the Bucs as a matchup for the Vikings, especially if they have to play the Vikings. Darnold has really struggled against cover 0 blitz looks, and this is a team that likes to blitz. They really enjoy sending those blitz looks. If they can make Darnold see ghosts like the Detroit Lions did in Week 18, with arguably an equally as dynamic offense, the Bucs really are primed to make a run straight through to the Super Bowl, because in the NFC Championship in that situation, they would face either the Lions or the Eagles, 2 teams that they beat. And if they make it to the Super Bowl and face off with the Chiefs, well, they took the Chiefs to overtime in the regular season. And like I said, this is a team that was banged up in the first half. I think the Bucs are a lot better now than they were in Week 2 when they beat the Lions, in Week 4 when they beat the Eagles, in Week 9 when they took the Chiefs to overtime. They got Mike Evans back. They got things going. The run game is better than ever. The Bucs have a lot of momentum, guys, and I think that they're primed to make some upsets.
Be in the moment, one play at a time. Believe it, and you'll be world champs. Believe it. Let's find it right here in our gut. Go get this done.
The Rams are a really tough team to peg down. I looked over their stats for a while, and it is so difficult to figure out what they are. They went 2-3 against playoff teams with a minus 16-point differential. They only played 2 playoff teams in the back half of the season. They went 1-1 against those 2, the Eagles and the Bills. For some reason, against the Bills, they put up 44 points, something that they haven't even gotten close to the rest of the season. Is that an indictment of the Bills, or is it the excellent game planning from Sean McVay? They do have a top 5 red zone defense, which will help keep these games close if they can make teams settle for field goals, and it kind of looks like that's what they've been doing as of late. Over the last 4 weeks of football, they've held 3 straight teams, the 49ers, the Jets, and the Cardinals, to under 10 points. But at the same time, they've offensively struggled and haven't been able to get over 20 points in that same time period, despite putting up 44 against the Bills just before. When I look at this team on paper and I look at the names that are attached, it seems like it should be obvious that at any point they could go off for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns to Puka Nacua, to Cooper Kupp, to be able to punch it in on the goal line every single time they get there with Kyren Williams. But this team has been so injured and so inconsistent through the first 4 or 5 games of the season that it was hard to figure out what exactly they were. But they went 9-2 over the last 11, not counting the Week 18 game where they rested starters. That's a massive streak, and once again, this is a really experienced team, a Super Bowl winning head coach, a Super Bowl winning quarterback who's been in the league forever, it feels like. Playing the Vikings is going to be tough, but they beat them before. One thing that I guess has me a little bit worried is the effect of the LA Wildfires on the mentality of the team. You know, if the team is low morale and, worried about their homes and their families and things of that nature, it can affect their on-field play. But at the same time, it could also reinvigorate them. It could give them a reason to play harder than ever before. So it's going to be really hard to gauge the exact mentality of the team going in. But if I were to describe the Rams, they're almost like NFC West Chiefs, where they just find ways to win. It's not always pretty. It's not always consistent. It's not always Stafford making the biggest throws or Kyron Williams breaking the runs or Jared Verse getting a big sack. It's a combination of all of those things working in tandem with the one goal of get this victory. And teams that are built like that are so cohesive and work together that well, those are the types of teams that you'll like to get the upset, to be able to go on the road and keep their composure and rattle other teams by just hitting them harder than they've been hit in a while. If they get past the Vikings, they're likely to head on the road to Detroit, a team Stafford obviously has a lot of experience with and history. And you could almost say that the Lions have been like a monkey on Stafford's back. Ever since they've gotten this good, the Rams have not been able to beat the Lions. And the Rams have given it their best effort. They had an overtime game against them in week 1 of this season. Last season, it came down to just a couple plays. So Stafford could be extra motivated to just punch a Lions defense in the mouth coming out of the bye week, a little rusty, a little tired, a little banged up still. I know the Rams don't look like the best team on paper, but that's just all the more reason why you shouldn't doubt them. They're here for a reason. They went 9-2 over an 11-game stretch for a reason. And I'm excited to see if they can pull off the upset against Minnesota.
Hey, we know what we got to do this next week, man. We know what we got to do, man. Come out here, have a great week, and let's go. Here we go. Vikes on 3. 1, 2, 3. Vikes!
Speaking of Minnesota went 3-3 in the regular season against playoff teams. They had a negative 3-point differential. One of the interesting things I noticed, though, is that from week 9 to week 16, they did not play a single playoff team. They lost 2 in a row in week 7 and 8 to Detroit and the Rams. Then they didn't play another one until week 17 and 18, where they played the Packers, won by 2 after a late surge. And then they lost in week 18 to the Lions. Obviously, we've already covered that game. If you want to know more about it, there's a video on my channel. As far as battle-tested teams, I actually would say the Vikings are one of the not-so-battle-tested. They kind of beat up on a lot of mediocre teams for quite a while. Most of the teams that they beat over this stretch are under 500. The only team over 500 that they beat was Seattle, and that came down to the very last second. Now, this is obviously a top 10 passing offense, but the defense has really been the star of the show. They're really interesting. They're a very blitz-heavy look. Their whole idea is to rattle and confuse the quarterback and use that to get lots of turnovers. They're first in turnovers with 33, in fact. They give up the 28th most passing yards of any defense in the league, though. So you can tell that this is a really volatile defense, and if things don't go their way, if they don't get those turnovers, if they don't get those sacks that they crave, then they're prone to give up the long ball, give up the touchdowns. They're 18th in the red zone, which isn't exactly impressive. They give up the most scores per drive of any defense in the league, but also have the most turnovers. So you could tell that this is a defense that is just live or die by the sword. And that can be really scary going up against really efficient playoff teams. One way to mitigate this is to control the ball and control time on offense. And that's one of the issues that the Vikings have had as well. Their time of possession isn't super impressive because they can't run the ball. They're 26th in yards per attempt at 4.1. Despite still being 14th in rush attempts, they actually run the ball quite a bit. Top half of the league, but they're bottom 6 in yards per attempt. They're 40% on third down, which isn't super impressive. They're 19th in the red zone on offense, which isn't super impressive. It's a really weird offense where it's like it feels like they're better than they actually are. One of the issues, too, that they keep having is that they let teams back in. A lot of their losses or close games come from fourth quarter surges. The Rams scored 16 points in the last 17 minutes of the game to win. The Packers scored 15 points in the fourth quarter to get it back to a 2-point game. In the Week 4 Packers matchup, they scored 22 points in the fourth quarter. If the Vikings hadn't gotten a late field goal at the end of the game, they actually could have blown that lead. Week 18, the Lions scored 2 touchdowns in the fourth. Granted, I think the team was pretty drained by that point. My point is, this is a team that struggles to put the opponent away, and they let opponents back into the game. And in the playoffs, that is an incredibly dangerous recipe. If the Vikings are going to go on a run, it's almost certainly going to lie in the hands of Sam Darnold. The defense is going to do what they do. they're probably going to succeed in that. They're going to give up some points, but they're also going to get some turnovers, going to get some sacks. And Darnold has to take advantage of those. Unless they can turn this running game around overnight, which I just don't think is going to happen, they need to trust that Darnold doesn't see ghosts. I hope that they watch that Week 18 film and they get a good understanding of why they got messed up the way that they did. Those cover zero looks, those dynamic blitzes, how they got to Darnold, how they got through, and do a better job of protecting him and making sure that they have plans to take advantage of those types of looks. Because if they beat the Rams and have to turn around and go play the Lions again, the Lions have a recipe for success. And if you don't adapt, you're going to die. In the end, your fate, Vikings fans, is in the hands of Sam Darnold, and I hope that you're okay with that.
What's up? It is Jaden Daniels, end zone. It is caught for the touchdown. Sockers takes Washington into the playoffs.
Thank you for making me right, baby. I love you.
The Commanders were projected at an over-under of 6.5 wins this season, and they won 12. That's just remarkable. Regardless of what happens from here on out, I think the Commanders should be really proud. They're a team that's really looking up, and they've got their guy. Franchise quarterback Jaden Daniels is a big reason that this team has gone on the run that they have. With Jaden Daniels under the helm, he's led this team to a top 5 scoring offense. They score on 50% of their drives, which is second most in the league, only to the Detroit Lions. They're one of the top rushing teams. When it comes to playoff football, they're 1-4, unfortunately, with a negative 30-point differential in those games. They've played 3 playoff teams in the last 8 weeks of football. 2 of those were the Eagles, and one of those Eagles games, they lost their quarterback. So you might want to stick an asterisk on that. I went ahead and included it with these stats anyway, because he did have a really impressive game, and they put up 36 points against the top defense in the league, which is really good. Obviously, the offense not being able to sustain a drive had an impact on that, but they got pretty unlucky against Pittsburgh, lost by a point, and then that first Eagles matchup, I think, is more of what we're likely to see in the playoffs here, where the Eagles just kind of out-muscled them. They missed quite a few field goals. I think it was like 8 points in field goals or something along those lines, like an extra point and 2 field goals. So the Eagles should have won by a lot more than they did, by just 8 points. But behind Jaden Daniels, I think that this team is capable of just about anything. If he steps up to the challenge, if he's motivated to take things on head on and he doesn't get rattled, this is a team that could easily put up 30 plus points against just about every team here in the playoffs, and depending on how the defense does, that might be enough. The defense is kind of weird because they don't get much sacks, and they're really bad against the run, which spells an issue here against the Buccaneers, and if they were to go on from here against the Lions and Eagles. But their passing defense is actually surprisingly good, and it should get better this weekend when they bring in Marshawn Lattimore. This is a young, inexperienced team that's built to sustain on offense. However, on the defensive side, that's where things are going to get a little questionable. And if that offense gets rattled, loses their confidence, and isn't able to put up points on 50% of their drives, that's where we're going to start running into problems. I don't know that there's a way for this defense to turn things around on a dime. It's hard to just flip a switch and suddenly your run defense isn't terrible. But they might need to stack the box against the Buccaneers on first down, on short down yardage, and just challenge Baker Mayfield to make throws, and he probably will make most of them. But if they give up a 40-yard, 50-yard rush to Bucky Irving, then the drive's over. There's at least a chance, I think, that if they sell out for the run and try to adjust to the pass, that they can force some inaccurate throws, get their hands on someone, press a receiver to get their route out of order, something to stay alive. Because if they're giving up 180 rushing yards every game on this playoff run, I just don't see how that's going to result in long-term success.
Way to handle your business. We go to the playoffs.
Packers went 9-8 last year and were the 7th seed. They're still the 7th seed this year, but they won 11 games this time instead. And I don't know how often we're going to see 11-win 7 seeds, but I don't imagine it'll be very often. Packers are top 10 on both sides of the ball. Looking at their numbers, it's almost surprising that they aren't better than they are. They went 2-5 against playoff teams. Of course, 4 of those 5 losses were against the Vikings and Lions, which were also the only 2 playoff teams that they've played in the second half of the season. In the first half, they had games against the Eagles and Texans and Rams. They went 2-1 against them. But I think all 3 of those teams are a lot different now than they were in the first half of the season. What makes the Packers a matchup interesting to me is that they are very boom or bust. When you look at a lot of their efficiency numbers, they look really good. They're a top 5 rushing offense. Although being 30th in pass attempts this season, they still managed to be top 3 in net yards per attempt. That's passing yards minus the sacks that you take. And a big reason for that is that the Packers' offensive line has only given up 22 sacks all season, and 8 of those were to Malik Willis. Love himself has only taken 14 sacks in 15 games, which is a remarkable number, only one up by Josh Allen, who took 14 sacks in 16 games. The offensive line is absolutely tremendous, but they haven't been able to sustain drives the way you think a top 5 rushing offense would, and that's because of some of the boom or bust potential of the offense. And a lot of that boom came from Christian Watson, who went down with a torn ACL in Week 18 and is not going to be available for the playoffs. When Christian Watson was on the field, the Packers were first in yards per route run and explosive plays per route. But they dropped to middle of the pack, 13th and 19th in those 2 stats without him. Losing Christian Watson is a huge blow. Guys are going to have to step up. It's going to come on Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed to just be the guys here in the playoffs. And they're going to have to trust their defense, which, like I said, their defense is really good. All around, they're probably like a top 5 defense. They don't give up much in the run game, and they don't give up much in the pass game. Now, they aren't that impressive on third downs and red zones, but they've forced 31 turnovers as well. So as long as they can continue to get turnovers, force fumbles, get a pick, keep the Packers offense on the field, then they have more opportunities to boom. And this run defense is pretty great. They allow the 7th fewest rushing yards in the league and allow a 3rd lowest 4 yards per attempt. That's a lot lower than Saquon's current 5.8. So coming into Philadelphia, where they're going to play a team that's probably going to run the ball 30 times, if they stifle that run and they force the Eagles to pivot and feel like they have to throw the ball, they really have a chance to upset. In my opinion, I think this is going to be a really low-scoring game, and it's going to just come down to who can get those few boom plays. If the Packers can pull it off and win the game something like 17-14, they're guaranteed to go on the road back to Detroit. Now, on one hand, they went 0-2 against Detroit, but their second loss was by just a field goal. The Lions felt forced to go for it so much and to keep the Packers off the field, they ended up going for it on 4th down 5 times. But it just goes to show you how afraid they were of that boom or bust, especially against the Detroit Lions defense that at the time was pretty rattled with injuries. If Jaden Reed can step up, if Romeo Doubs can step up, if Dontavian Wicks cannot drop the damn ball, that Packers offense just needs a couple key plays to get things going. As long as they can lean on Josh Jacobs to keep drives alive when they do get those 3rd and shorts, to just get them a new set of downs each time and more opportunities to take those shots, I think that they can really upset people because their defense is good enough to keep them in it. And when your defense is this good, you can live being a boom or bust offense.
And that's not a prediction, that's a spoiler.
So how do I think things are going to shake out? In the Eagles and Packers game, I think I'm tempted to stick with the Eagles. Like I said, I think it'll be low scoring. I think it'll be a lot of the Eagles getting like on the verge of field goal range and just, taking points, chipping away, and then trusting their defense to not give up the big play, which is what Vic Fangio's defense is so good at. If the Packers pivot and really lean on the dink and dunk offenses and just be patient with it, they could adapt and still keep up with kind of a more low-scoring offense. But they're a boom or bust team, and I don't know that they want to give up their identity that they've made their own and that they're effective at. In the end, I think the Eagles are going to chip away at them and end up winning this thing 16-14. Bucks and Commanders, it's been my pick for the most interesting matchup of the week because it really could go either direction. These are two offenses that are incredible and two defenses that have good showings and bad showings. If you get the bad Bucks, the Commies could run away with this. If you get the good Bucks, the Bucks could very well trounce the Commanders. I think you're going to get a little bit of both. And because of that, I think this is going to be a high-scoring affair where the Bucks end up pulling it out in the end thanks to some home field advantage and just being able to stay motivated and stay composed. Final score, I'm going to say it's going to be 36-33. Rams and Vikings in Arizona. It's not really a home game, but yeah. You know, a lot of teams lose the week after playing the Lions because they are such a rough team to play against that they end up just kind of banging you up. I think that's a tough ask. And especially coming off a week where he got rattled the way he did. Now, Sam Darnold has bounced back from a lot of his bad games this season, and I don't know that he'll necessarily be bad against the Rams. But the fact that the Rams already beat them once, and they seemed like they had an effective strategy for the Vikings defense to be able to put up those points late and mount a comeback. In the playoffs, you can't let teams back in, and that's what the Vikings do consistently. I'm going to go with the Rams on this one. I'm going to say this is pretty similar to their last matchup. I'm going to say they win it 28-24. The Lions and the Rams and the Bucks and the Eagles. Let's start with the Bucks and the Eagles. The Bucks are a team that have kind of had the Eagles number over the last several seasons. There's something like 5-1 against them over the last 6 games. Of course, that goes back through like the Brady era and stuff like that. But I think there's a big difference between playing, a sort of rattled Eagles team that hasn't really found their identity in Tampa Bay versus playing this Eagles team that has figured out what they want to be and how they want to succeed in Philadelphia, where the fans are as ruckus as they are anywhere. I like Baker Mayfield. I would love for him to have this honeymoon moment of being able to go on a deep playoff run. There's a possibility that it's Rams and Buccaneers in the NFC Championship match, and that sounds very interesting to me. But unfortunately, I think the Bucks lose here. The Eagles are going to the NFC Championship after a 27-21 victory. Stafford to Detroit. It's one of the most interesting matchups and storylines every single time we get to see it. It excites me. But the Lions have had the Rams number, and they kind of continued to do so. And we're talking about two teams that just find ways to win, that are gritty and get down and dirty with their opponent. The Rams are great at that, but the Lions are the best at that. I think it's a hard-hitting game. I think it's down to the wire. But in the end, I think we've got a 26-23 victory for Detroit as they head to the NFC Championship game. Lions and Eagles. Now, this was a matchup I talked about earlier being worried about because the Eagles are a team on paper that's built to beat a team like the Lions. They're not going to give up the long ball. They're going to play consistent defense. They're not going to let you run all over them. But it's not like the Philadelphia offense is infallible either. I think this would be a really, really gritty game, and nobody's better in these gritty games than the Lions. In the end, I just don't think that Hurts and company have the heart to get past Detroit in Detroit with all those fans that have waited decades, literal decades for a successful team. I think the Lions stick this one out and win it. I'm going to say they win it 20-17. So our Super Bowl matchup is set. It's the 1 seeds matching up against each other, the Chiefs and the Lions. If you want to see how the Chiefs got there, it's in my previous video. And I actually think the Lions match up really interestingly against the Chiefs. Their play style just seems like something that the Chiefs would struggle with. They're already not an effective runner. They run to keep teams honest, and they run to set up short down yardage. It's a really great third down offense against the best third down defense. And the reason the Chiefs' third down offense is so good is because they set up those short third down situations, but those short ones are going to turn into medium ones when you play a top defense like the Lions. So I imagine the Chiefs would struggle in those scenarios. And honestly, the Lions offense against the Chiefs defense, I feel pretty good about the Lions in that situation. The Chiefs have really struggled to stop tight ends and slot receivers. And would you look at that? Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown. What a perfect fit to take advantage of that. Plus, a Jared Goff who can stay poised in the pocket. He trusts his O-line. He trusts the time that they buy them. Even if you send cover 0 at him, I think that Goff will stand strong, hit St. Brown on a slant, take it for 20 yards. Chiefs do have a top run defense. They've stopped the run all season long. They really wanted to make that their mantra going into this season. But stopping the Raiders from running is a lot different than stopping the Detroit Lions from running with this offensive line in particular, with these talents. I'm not saying Gibbs is rushing for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, but I think he has a pretty solid day. In the end, it would come down to time management, really who has the ball last. And if that's the case, no team's going to keep their drive alive going for it on 4th down more than the Lions. I think I'm taking the Lions in this situation, and I think I'm taking them 28-24. The Lions are my pick for the Super Bowl. What's your pick? Let me know down below. Who's going all the way in the NFC? Who's primed for an upset? I think we've got a lot of upset potential this weekend. Let me know what you think. Thanks for checking out the video, and I'll see you guys this weekend. Enjoy some playoff football. Peace.